Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm just gonna look at my command center in a second, so hold on one sec. All right. So hi, everyone. My name is Dawn Zitney. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a well-being educator counselor here at Health and Wellness at the University of New Hampshire. I'm on the main campus here in Durham, and I've been at UNH about 20 years, and in my role here at Health and Wellness, this is one of my favorite things to do, is get to talk to alumni, faculty, staff, community members about the ways in which we could all take care of ourselves. So I'm going to start my presentation. What we're going to be doing today, before I even show my screen, is a little bit of what I do in all the programs that I offer, is that offer us an opportunity to learn a little bit about stress. It's a word we use all the time. What does it exactly mean, and how does stress show up possibly for some of us this time of year, but also all through the year? And then give you all an opportunity for a little bit of self-reflection. And I will be opening up the chat, so there will be opportunities for sharing if people would like as well. And then also hoping that what you learned today will be skills that then you can take with you, not just for this week or today, but hopefully for the next month and as you start to go into the new year. I also hope that whatever you take with you today, that you can also share it with someone else, that what you learn here, if we share it with other people, it helps all of us be well. And there's something really inherent in sharing what we learned that helps it kind of find a place in our body too. And when I was looking at the title of the program, about managing seasonal stress, and I just think about this is a good reminder just in terms of stress in general, not just this time of year when there's more family expectations, but a good reminder all the time is that we can only control ourselves, that there's so many things out of our control, but we can't change other people, we can't change other people's behavior. Sometimes we can't change our family traditions if it's family that's stressing you out. But what we can control, which is a pretty amazing part of our human body, is we can control our reactions to situations. We can control how we respond, and we can be more skillful in navigating stress. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So I'm going to share my screen. To admit, it's very hard being on a webinar. I'm so used to seeing people, and so it's hard not seeing people, but I know you're out there. So here we are, Holiday Harmony, effective techniques for managing seasonal stress. And so this is a word, and I even was thinking about this when I was getting my presentation together, thinking about how I wanted to share space with you all. We use this word all the time, managing seasonal stress. And there's something about the word managing that sometimes rubs me the wrong way. So I would suggest that we move over to this, effective techniques to coping with seasonal stress. When we think about coping with stress as opposed to managing it, it creates a little bit more space for us to allow ourselves to be stressed. And that's actually a good thing. We'll talk about why stress is actually a good thing some of the time. And when we think about managing stress, it's almost like we need to have power over something. And when I think about coping, it's how can we sit next to our stress? And when we're essentially sitting next to our stress, we're creating space for us to sit next to ourselves with how we are showing up. So let's talk about how we can cope a little bit with seasonal stress. This is just a little bit about Health and Wellness, the medical facility here on campus. I'm not going to go over all this, but just to let you know the context of where I'm coming from. So I'm going to invite us all just to land. I don't know about you all, but I've been on campus since about 7:30 this morning. I've been up early. I've had meetings. You've all probably been doing many things till you got here at noon. So let's just give ourselves this opportunity to just land right here, right now. So if it feels safe and accessible for you in this moment, I invite you to sit tall in your chair. Put your feet on the ground if that's possible. And then let your hands just relax. Notice if your hands are interlaced or you have little fists, let your hands just relax maybe onto your thighs. And then if it feels safe and accessible to you, I invite you to close your eyes. And know that at any moment you can make a different choice. not just in this moment, but in each moment of our day. If you're choosing not to close your eyes, you just have a soft glance at the screen. And just notice what that feels like to soften. And can you let your eyes maybe soften a little bit more, letting them relax and they're softened? Letting that softening just start to cascade in your face by letting the skin on your face relax. Maybe letting your jaw hinge, open up and close a couple times and just rest in a neutral state. And notice if your shoulders are up by your ears, can you let your shoulders just come down? Let your shoulder blades come onto your back. And then as your shoulders start to come down, you may even feel your arms get a little bit more soft. And let that softness cascade down now to your fingertips. Just letting your fingers be soft. Knowing that in this moment, there's nothing to hold, nothing to do. The only thing that's being asked of you in this moment is to soften. And as we start to soften a little bit more into this space, I invite you to just sit back in your chair a little bit. So even though we have this tall, dignified posture, can you find that balance of allowing yourself to relax? Yeah, and as you sit back in the chair, just notice what that feels like to be supported by the chair. Being held in this moment. And notice your sit bones on the chair, the backs of your thigh. And then bring your awareness all the way down to your feet, feeling your feet on the ground. Your feet on the ground. And our feet on the ground, grounding us to this moment, reminding us that we are right here, right now. You are right here. Just let your belly get soft. Notice if you're sucking in your belly. And let your belly just get soft. Let it expand into your waistband. Bellies are meant to be soft, despite what we're doing. We're just going to pause here for a few more breaths. Pausing, softening, and landing. Ready? Just open our eyes and bring some light movement back into your body. Thank you all for doing that. I think when we do these soft landings, and I actually do these every time I lead a presentation, no matter who the audience is, and there's something about it that calms me down. And hopefully it calmed you down too, just brought this like little bit of softness so that we could be a little bit more present. And I kind of think of it about when we're flying and the pilot makes that beautiful landing and you're like, oh, did we just land? And that just feels so good, as opposed to those times when we're flying and the pilot makes that really bumpy landing and it's a little bit jarring and you're gripping your hands to the seat. And so we have the control in this moment to soften. Sometimes these soft landings are going to feel calm and they're going to help kind of regulate a little bit, move you out of your stress response into your relaxation response just a little bit. And then there's going to be other times where they just don't work. And that's the thing about taking care of ourselves, is that there's going to be times when we pull out our toolkit and there's something we always go to that's really helpful. And then there's going to be times when that one thing may just not really work. And so we should have exactly that, a toolkit, so then we could try something else. Because each day our life is showing up with something different. And so it's good to have different tools to take with us. So there's a nice tool to take with you all. If we ended our presentation right now, that would be a beautiful thing. If you did that when you get to your office, when you're in your car, when you get home, when you're in the light, you don't need to close your eyes, but you could just feel the softening. Let your jaw relax, your eyes relax, your shoulders. And that just starts to send a signal to your body that you're doing something different, that you're actively trying to take care of yourself. So a lot of the work that we do here at UNH at Health and Wellness is really framed around well-being and wellness. And so I'm not going to go a lot into our well-being wheel, but I wanted to share this with you. It's on our website if you'd like to go on our website and look at it a little bit more. But these 8 dimensions of wellness, those circles on the inside of the hands, those are all the ways in which we take care of ourselves. And as you can see, there's many ways that we could take care of ourselves, and there's many ways that our wellness can help us be well, and many ways in which our wellness can get challenged. When I look at this and I think about this time of year, we're probably all having some anticipation about maybe social engagements. We're having some emotions about what's happening. We're probably thinking about our environments if we're thinking about traveling. And we're also probably thinking about spiritual wellness, whether we're religious or not. We're at this crossroads in our life where we're about to end one year and start a new year. And so for some people, transitions can be really hard. And then, of course, all that shows up somatically in our physical body. This time of year can bring up a lot of financial stress, but for a lot of us, that financial stress is here year round. And then, of course, there's our intellectual and occupational wellness that could either help us or sometimes give us a little bit more challenge. And so just to frame this, that when we think about stress, it is a whole body perspective. It's a whole body experience. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. And the hands on the outside of the wellness wheel really represent what we define as well-being. And well-being is the ways in which your communities you belong to, you work in, you play in, you love in, you do community service in, all the ways in which our communities support us. And so for us to truly be well, it's not an individual pursuit, that it really requires us to have hands holding our wellness. And we hope that idea is really represented here in this image. So let's just hold this. I'm going to ask you all to hold this. And as you think about, there's probably a reason that you all showed up here today. And so I invite you to just think about how has stress been showing up for you this season. And so this season could be the holiday season, whatever holiday you may celebrate. It could be the winter season. Maybe there's something happening in your life. It's a new season in your life. But how has stress been showing up for you all? I'm just going to give you a moment just to think about that. And the chat function is available. So if anyone ever wants, there's gonna be a few things where I'm gonna ask us to put things in the chat. This is one, if anyone would like to add something to the chat. If not, you can just hold what is causing you stress. That's a really broad question. And I ask this question really broadly because how we all define stress is a little bit different, and how stress shows up for us is all a little bit different. And so let's talk about really what stress is. When we think about stress being what it is it's a whole body response. So it shows up in our whole body. And when I think about the whole body, I think about it as our physical body, our emotional body, our mental body, and then for many of us too, our spiritual body. And so when we think about stress, and when I showed this slide too, I also encourage you to think of this as symptoms of stress, just like we're thinking about, whether or not you have symptoms of a cold, what are those symptoms? So we start to pay attention to our physical health. We could do the same with our mental health. So some of the ways that stress starts to show up in our bodies, we could feel tired or fatigued. We could feel tension, like some of you may have felt that tension of your shoulders up towards your ears and what that felt like to relax. We could feel aches and pains, headaches, those tension headaches in the front of our head. Sometimes we get dizzy. Some of us may get blurry vision. And we tend to see a lot of GI disruption. So a lot of nausea or diarrhea. Think about it even like when you're nervous, like being nervous is a really natural human emotion experience. And oftentimes that shows up with butterflies in our stomach. And so if we're having these stress symptoms, that sometimes that could lead to those butterflies just getting a little bit out of control. We start to feel nauseous, diarrhea. We see a lot of this actually at the health center. Students coming in and they're having GI symptoms, and really what a lot of times it's about is stress. Rapid heartbeat, your heart starts beating a little bit faster. You start maybe feeling sweaty. It can impact our sexual performance, the ability to experience pleasure or to get or maintain an erection. We could start to get ill. So when our nervous system is working to keep us safe, we're in this stress response, then all of our other systems are kind of not working at their full capacity. So that's why, ironically, not ironically, I should say, we start to see more illness this time of year. That it's not just because of the cold weather, but we're seeing stress, we're seeing more people inside, we're seeing more, there's just a lot of things happening that contribute to illness. And then sometimes we could be injured. And so if we think about what's been showing up for you physically, think about if any of these symptoms have been showing up. And of course, this isn't a complete exhaustive list of our physical symptoms. There's probably other ways stress has been showing up for you physically. And so that's something to pay attention to. And then when we think about cognitively, so the mental part of stress, we start to have a hard time concentrating. So some of you may even be having that now. You're having a hard time concentrating. And I bet if you're like me, who does a webinar, you're probably multitasking right now, right? Because we feel like there's so many things we could also be doing. And then we have a hard time focusing. And the difference between concentration and focusing is, let's say I'm trying to solve a math problem. Like there's something very specific I'm trying to focus on, and that could be really hard. Whereas concentration is more kind of global. We tend to have a hard time remembering things. That could be short-term memories. Why am I at the grocery store? Why did I walk into this room? Or it could be more long-term memories that we just aren't remembering things that are happening. And we could see that this could really impact our intellectual wellness. And for a lot of us too, it can impact our occupational wellness, showing up to work and not knowing, wait, what was I supposed to do? Maybe missing a meeting because your mind is just somewhere else. And then having a hard time problem solving. Oftentimes what happens when we're stressed is we're probably problem solving too much. And so our brain is really getting taxed. And so then it just gets like problem solving fatigue. And some of you may have experienced this where you're like, I just can't answer another question, solve another problem, just can't. And so our brain just really gets on overdrive. And then we start to see our emotions show up emotionally. We could tend to get moody, irritable, highly sensitive. That's where maybe you start crying really easily, or maybe in situations that are kind of inappropriate to be crying or you normally wouldn't cry in. We could start to get hypervigilant. I think about getting a little bit jumpy. And then we start to feel shame, self-doubt. We start blaming ourselves for whatever's happening in our lives. Maybe we start beating ourselves up because we're feeling some of these physical things. Maybe because we're not remembering things, maybe because we're feeling moody. So we start internalizing all of these symptoms, and that leads to shame. And when we feel that all these things, it could also lead to low confidence. And then the hallmarks of burnout are being overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted. And so, of course, we're experiencing more of that just culturally. It's something we've all started talking about more culturally in the last 4 or so years. And the thing about burnout, we could have a whole webinar about burnout, is that it is a workplace phenomenon. That research shows it is a workplace phenomenon. And the workplace being the place you all go to every day for work. And for some of us, for mothers who have children at home, that the research defines that as a workplace too. So hallmarks of burnout. And this is really fascinating. So also, our behavior starts shifting when we're stressed. And so we start overdoing things. We may start oversleeping, undersleeping, eating too much, not eating enough, moving our body too much, not moving our body enough, working too much, not working enough. And then we are a culture that loves substance use. You can watch any TV show tonight, and there will be a commercial about some kind of substance, whether it's a medication, an over-the-counter, alcohol. We love substances. And so, of course, drugs are good, right? they help us feel good in the moment. But what happens is when that substance wears off, our problems are still there. And depending on what we're using, let's say we use alcohol, it's the #1 drug in our country, it could have a depressive impact the next day. And for some people, they could feel a little bit anxious. And so sometimes when we're stressed, we tend to overuse. Think about too, if we're going to a holiday party or a company party, or we're going to a function with a friend, we could maybe use substances as a way to feel more socially comfortable. And then we tend to zone out. And so our culture also is very good at zoning out. There's many ways we could zone out. Netflix, watching all this multimedia that we have, video games, shopping online, gambling, pornography. And so those are some of the things that we could do that are just zoning us out of reality. And the reality is none of those things are bad. Zoning out is good sometimes. We need a little shift to get our mind out of the moment. But if we're doing those things in excess where it's getting in the way of our daily functioning, then it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem. Then some of us start to socialize too much where we can't be alone. And then others of us maybe start to isolate. Maybe we stop grooming, taking showers, brushing our teeth. There could be avoidance or disengagement from our life, things we would naturally be doing, enjoy be doing, but we just aren't enjoying them. Maybe we're starting to call out sick more. And that's a good thing. If you're not feeling well, mentally or physically, yeah, take a mental health day. But if you notice that you're really needing a lot of these mental health days and taking the days off isn't helping that reset, then that becomes maybe a way of avoidance and disengagement. And then, of course, procrastination. Procrastination is a symptom of anxiety, and it's really rooted in this desire to be perfect. And it really is debilitating where we just can't do anything until we feel the pressure on our back. And so as you look at this, I invite you all to look and see what these symptoms are that you have experienced, again, that may or may not be here. And just like, again, I'm going to say it again, just like when we're paying attention to our physical health, we could do the same with our mental health and just paying attention to these symptoms. And at this time of year, you may feel some of these symptoms come up. I think about seasonal depression. So we would see that emotionally, that maybe you're having a little bit lower mood. We could see that behaviorally, that maybe you're starting to eat a little bit more. Maybe you're starting to sleep a little bit more. And the reality is too, that those things are good. Like our bodies are meant to down-regulate in the winter. It's a time of rest and reflection. It's kind of like being a bear, like, right? We can't go into hibernation, but how many of us have been nesting at home more, like changing maybe our bedding, changing our lights, maybe you're decorating differently this month. And so we go into this like inner world where we start to slow down. And so in some ways, it's going to be really natural too, when we don't have as much daylight, that we're going to maybe sleep a little bit more. But if you're noticing that your mood is really low, your energy is really low, that could be a symptom of seasonal affective disorder. All right. So I've been using this word stress all the time, and you all probably use it. And so what exactly is it? What is stress? And this is just like when I always share this, no matter the audience, it's just like when we do a sex education program here at UNH and we ask people to define sex. It's kind of a tricky question. Like we use these words all the time, but what do they mean? And often what we are all probably thinking are probably the symptoms of stress. Like, right, you're feeling overwhelmed. It just feels like you have too much to do. And so those are some of the symptoms of stress. So this is how we define stress here at UNH. So stress is what arises when something you care about is at stake. Stress is what arises when something you care about is at stake. So this definition comes from Kelly McGonigal. She wrote a book called The Upside of Stress, and she's a health researcher out in California. And she also has a wonderful TED Talk. And so you could go on, you can find her TED Talk on YouTube if you're interested. But what we like about this definition when we started using it here at UNH is it really flips the way we think about stress. That often when we think about stress in our culture, we're thinking about, blood pressure. We're thinking about all the bad things it can do to our health. And that is true. If we go back to that symptom slide, if we're staying in our stress response, and we aren't really coping and we're feeling all those physical and emotional symptoms, that is going to be really taxing on our body. It's going to weather our body. But then there's this other side of stress. That stress could actually be good. It could be what motivates us. And so when we think about stress from this definition, it offers this just bigger landscape to recognize that everyone experiences stress. I mean, look at all of you on this webinar. We had over 80 people register for the webinar, right? And that's probably a small pocket of people who would like to be learning about stress and how to navigate the next couple months. And what is also true is that stress is a really natural part of life. That if we are living a life of meaning and purpose, if you are living a life of meaning and purpose, if you are pursuing your goals, you are going to be experiencing stress. And so I think about, if I were to share, about myself, I'll use myself as an example. This time of year could be really hard. I don't live near my family. And so I've had to create other rituals for myself, other ways of celebrating the holidays, and even deciding, do I want to celebrate the holidays? What do the holidays look like for me? And that has been really stressful because, one, it's change, but it's stressful because what's at stake is my feeling of connection, my feeling of being cared for, of having rituals. So actually my spirituality comes into play. And so that all things, if you all think about some of the things that are causing you stress right now, I would encourage you, and we're going to practice this in a few moments, are they things that you care about? And the reality is, yes, they probably are. Even if we say, oh, but I don't care about that. That doesn't stress me out. If we need to qualify something that way, then most likely it is something that is meaningful to us. So stress, we feel stress when we are living a life of meaning and when we're pursuing our goals. We are going to be experiencing stress. And that it is that full body response that we just talked about. And what we know to be true is that attempting to avoid stress just makes it worse. It's kind of like when you do your laundry and you don't put it away, and then you do another load of laundry and you add all that folded laundry onto the other. Eventually that laundry pile gets really big, and then that stresses you out. And then you move it to the closet, you close the door so you don't have to look at it. But then that becomes a different stressor. What would happen if we maybe just put a few things away a day? And so that's what I want us to think about the remainder of our time together, is how can we use coping mechanisms to help us cope with stress through the remainder of our lives, not just for today. It's a big goal, so let's just start with today. And so what we know to be true about the benefits of stress, coping with stress, is that it increases energy. It increases our pleasant mood states, which we're going to practice and talk about. It increases our relationship with self and others. It increases our sense of self-worth and confidence. I have yet to meet anyone in my work who wouldn't like to be a little bit more confident and feel more self-worth. It impacts positively our ability to think and make decisions with clarity. It enhances our relationships, and it could lead to more academic, professional success. And so I don't know about you all, but I will take all of those things on that list. And so I invite you to just pause for a moment and think about what benefits you would experience if you got better at coping with stress. Just give you a moment to just think about that, and then we're going to practice. So when I think about coping with stress, I don't need to know any of you to know that you have coping skills. That you would not be signed up for a webinar today if you did not have coping skills. Like the fact that you recognize that this would be helpful for you, or maybe you're here to learn something, share it with someone else, that is a coping skill. And so what it's really important is that we remember that we already have coping skills. And so many times, maybe you've done this with your healthcare provider, but students will come here to the health center and they'll want to know ways to cope with stress. And the very first thing I ask them is, what has worked in the past? And then we talk about that. And so I always ask that of you too. What has worked in the past? Have you been using those coping skills lately? And maybe there's a reason they're not working, and that's okay. And then also, are there coping skills that you feel would be helpful for you to learn? And so we can always be adding to that toolkit that I talked about earlier. And one of the ways I like thinking about coping skills, because I think that word, just like the word wellness is really getting overused, the word mindfulness is really getting overused, and those are two of my favorite things. Coping skills are also one of my favorite things. But sometimes we overuse these words and they lose some of their meaning. So the way I like to think about coping skills is always asking yourself what would be helpful. And particularly, what would be helpful in this moment? Because each moment may require a different coping skill. And what I love about this question of what would be helpful is that it's probably a question you have asked someone in your life before. You may have asked a friend, parent, coworker, child, a pet, what would be helpful. And so it's a skill we already have. Now it's about turning that skill and bringing it to ourselves. And so what I'm going to share with you are some coping skills that have been proven to be helpful. And they're probably different coping skills than probably you're thinking I'm going to share. So the first one that we're going to practice together, and this is the one where I'm going to ask us to use the chat if you feel comfortable. You could also send your response to just me, and I won't share your name as I go through the chat and talk about a few of the things or the themes that come up, is we're going to practice changing our relationship to stress. So again, remember, we don't want to get rid of stress, because if we get rid of stress, we're going to get rid of our meaning, but we want to change our relationship to stress. I often think about this in the sense of a growth mindset. You know, if we have a growth mindset, we're going to be learning from our mistakes. We're going to be learning from other people. We're always going to be wanting to learn more, to grow, not see our mistakes or other people as threats. And the same thing about stress. If we have a stress mindset, we're not going to see our stress so much as a threat, but an opportunity to connect with the meaning of our lives and the opportunity to connect with that question, what would be helpful in this moment? So we're going to do this little flow chart. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk us through a little practice, and then I'm going to ask you to use the chat at one point, and then I'm going to talk a little bit and then ask you to use the chat again. And of course, using the chat is optional. You don't have to do it. You could just observe, or if you would like, you could write things down on a piece of paper that you have next to you. So what I want you all to do is just sit up once more, sit back in that chair, and relax your jaw once more. Relax your eyes once more. Just physically, let's just pause. Just physically pause. In this pause, I invite you to take 3 deep breaths, breathing in, and then slowly breathing out. Let the exhale be longer than you. I invite you to turn to your stress and ask yourself, what's making you feel stressed in this moment? What is making you feel stressed in this moment? And you could just use one word or a sentence. And let's use the chat. Let's put that in the chat. What's making you feel stressed right now? So we see here recently laid off, financial wellness showing up. Yeah, so much on our plate for the holidays. Yeah, our wellness, I think of our wellness being a plate. There's so much on our plate. Work, occupational wellness, everything. Work, relationships, finance, drinking. So the next thing I ask you all to do is, what's at stake with these things? What's at stake with being laid off? Money, the holidays, with work, relationships. What's at stake? You can put that in the chat, or you can write it down. You could just hold it. Everything's at stake. It's all interconnected. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, security. Like, think about that. Like, our security is at stake. And as human beings, we need to feel secure to thrive, to live. Oh, yes, Scott. Dealing with life situations as senior living alone. Holiday happiness, paying bills. Yeah. And so when we think about this, if this is when I wish like we were all live together and we could have these like conversations, if we even think about paying bills, it's not the bills that are at stake, but it's like, if I don't pay on my electric bill, like let's say that, if I can't pay my rent, what's going to happen then? And so we go a little bit deeper, like what's at stake? And yeah, our financial wellness, there's so much at stake. Living alone, there's so much probably at stake, thinking about our physical wellness, our safety, our emotional wellness, our social wellness. There's so much at stake. And so we start to turn towards what's at stake. And even though it may feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's really important, especially when we share it with other people. So I appreciate you all being vulnerable and sharing that with one another. The next part of this little chart is that we then could take skillful action. And so I often like reminding people that action doesn't need to be like these big sweeping things. That in fact, action to be really to make change in our lives, it requires small little, this word like snacks is becoming really important, like these like little action snacks. And so I ask you all, what would be something you would like to do just for today to take care of yourself? And ask yourself, what would be helpful just for today? And let's put that in the chat. Even if you didn't share your stress or what's at stake, I invite you to put what would be helpful. So moving our bodies, social connection. Yeah, get started on writing holiday cards. Yeah, probably feel really good. If you don't have holiday cards, maybe the first step today is just going to get them or going to get the stamps. Yeah, reading, fresh air. Yes, getting out, getting fresh air. So important this time of year. And so we think about these things like, are they going to necessarily solve our, when I'm connecting with a friend, is that going to be paying my bills? No. But what it will do, just like exercising won't pay my bills, but what it will do is it will hopefully move my mindset over to a place where I could maybe think a little bit more globally. Because when we're stressed, we tend to get these, we tend to think very narrowly. So when we do these things, they're going to help us feel a little bit more relaxed in the moment and be able to think more clearly and maybe make decisions. When we connect with someone, that could just check off so many things. It can help us feel safe, it can help us feel emotionally well, physically well. And so when we think about these things, just like the thing that's stressing you out, there's so much more underneath it that I want us to be starting to think about. Our coping skills are so much more underneath it. So, we'll often hear coping skills like, I'm going to have a cup of tea. And I love you all having a cup of tea. I have nothing against cups of tea. And I want a cup of tea right now too. But it's not going to solve my problems. But what it will do is it will put me in a mindset so that I can maybe look at my stress a little bit differently and make small tweaks that are more impactful. And that's when the changes, the coping mechanisms start to build onto it. So the practice of this mindset practice is something we could do every day. When you start to feel, and many times a day, I do this many times a day. When you start to feel stressed, you could pause in that moment and say, okay, what's going on? What is causing me to feel this stress? What's at stake? And what would be helpful in this moment? And sometimes maybe in the moment is like, I just need to work. I need to compartmentalize that and I will deal with it when I get off work. And so know that that's a healthy coping mechanism too. I also remind people that we don't want to just do these practices, whatever coping skill it is. We don't want to do them when we are completely like standing at the edge, when we are so stressed out. We want to be doing them every day so that they become just inherent skills. We even want to do them when we're feeling pretty good. We could still be stressed and feel good. Like we could hold both things. We want to be doing these things all moments of our life so that when we are starting to move towards the edge of our stress and we're starting to feel overwhelmed, before we get there, we can start implementing these things so that hopefully we could prevent us from getting overwhelmed. And that's really important. We want to prevent those overwhelmed feelings because when we get into that overwhelmed state, then it's really hard to just help ourselves. So thank you all for doing that. And we'll make sure you all have access to this little flow chart too. So let's see, the next practice I want us to practice together is naming your mood. And so it kind of goes with what we were just doing. It's an opportunity of self-reflection, and it's also an opportunity of taking skillful action. Research shows that one of the best things we can do to take care of ourselves is what psychologists call affect labeling. And so it's basically naming how you're feeling in the moment and getting really granular about how you're feeling. And what that does is it once more creates the space for us to pause, to connect with what's going on. And when we offer that space of connection with how we're feeling, maybe it's just that we just need to sit in that feeling, feel what it feels like. And then sometimes maybe it's something we ask ourselves, what could be helpful in this moment to move me out of this mood that I'm in? And so really, it depends what you need in that moment. We don't always need to move out of moods. We could stay in them and be with them and move through them eventually. And so we use this tool, and I'm going to ask us to use the chat once more. We use this tool here at UNH. We actually borrow it from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. It's called the Mood Meter. And what I'm going to ask you all to do is just find how you're feeling right now in this moment and put it in the chat. Maybe take a deep breath or two, build in that pause, and then find how you're feeling. We'll put it in the chat. Which you can see, those of you who shared, we're feeling many things: excited, anxious, enthusiastic, happy, apathetic, upbeat, optimistic, empowered, grateful. So a few things I feel like I say this about every topic. We could do a whole webinar on this mood meter. I'll try to talk about it quickly, but hopefully meaningfully. So as you can see, there's two words that we often use, maybe three words that we often use all the time to describe how we feel that are not on this mood meter. And that is good, bad, and fine. One, let's start with fine. Fine doesn't really ever say anything. Fine's like an empty word when it comes to our moods. When we think about using the language of, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling bad, it starts to moralize our emotions, that our emotions are either good or bad. And the reality is that none of our emotions are good or bad because they are showing up for a reason, that our emotional states are a result of what's happening in that moment. So instead, what we see here on the mood meter, when you look at the axes, is that we see energy. So there's some moods that have high energy. We see that in the red box and the yellow box. When we look over at the red box, those high energy moods also are low pleasant moods. So that's where we feel anxious, we feel frightened, angry. Those are really important emotions. If we're angry about something, it's probably connected to our meaning, something that we care about. If we're feeling anxious about something, that's actually your nervous system just alerting you to danger. That could be perceived or it could be real, but that's what our body does. And so those emotions are showing up for a reason. When we go down to, we look at the blue box, we start to see then emotions then have low energy, or if we look over to the green box, low energy over there too. The blue box is low energy, low pleasantness. This is where we tend to see low moods, where sadness tends to live, sadness that could then turn into depression. And again, those are not bad moods. Are those painful? Is being in the red and the blue like really unpleasant and painful? Absolutely. But they're happening for a reason. And you have the capacity to help yourself, ask yourself what would be helpful in this moment. And sometimes maybe it is asking for help from a friend, a family member, a healthcare provider. We move over to the other side of the box, we see these are the high pleasant emotions. We see high energy, low energy. So that yellow box is like me being energized right now because I'm public speaking. And I enjoy this. But I'm also pretty stressed right now too, because I am public speaking, because it means a lot to me that I do well. But I'm using all my energy to show up for this occasion. And so this is where we see the yellow box. The thing that happens when we're in the yellow is that sometimes if we're too high energy, it can make it really difficult for us to focus. And so if something really exciting happens and then you have to go into a meeting or have a phone call with someone, it can be really hard to just concentrate because your energy is really big in that moment. And then when we go down to the green box, these are where we're just really chill. Usually we end up in this green box when we've achieved a goal, where something that we've been working towards happened. And we just feel like we can kind of relax, take a breath, take a step back. And the reality is we need all these things. We need all these things. And I would imagine if you were like any other human being, whether or not you realized it today, you have probably been all over this mood meter at some time today. And that is totally natural, because as human beings, we are going to feel all these things. What's important is we could ask ourselves that question at the top of the screen, just like we did with the mood, the stress mindset shift. Right now, I am feeling. So we start to connect with the present moment. And when we connect with the present moment, it helps bring our attention back from the past, where we tend to ruminate, back from the future, where we tend to get a little anxious and overthink, and it brings us to the right here and the now. How am I feeling? The next thing we could ask ourselves is that same question. What would be helpful in this moment? And so for me, I'll use me as an example. I'm feeling really energized, but I still need to be focused. And so I need to slow down talking. I need to take maybe a deep breath. And so for those of you who are maybe in the red box, what would be helpful in this moment? And maybe it's just letting yourself like, oh, what am I anxious about? Oh yeah, that's really important to me. No wonder I'm feeling that way. So maybe it's connecting to the meaning of why you're feeling that way. And just sometimes doing that creates the space. Think about it like being in a box and you feel like you can't move, but the box starts to open, you start to move a little bit more. Just having these pauses could create us this space to be like, oh, yeah, no wonder I'm feeling anxious. That's really important to me. And that's beautiful. Just feeling that. And then you may feel that energy come down and pleasantness start to come. So, the mood meter, beautiful tool. I encourage you all to use it with family, with friends, put it on the refrigerator. And it's one of those things too to keep using every day, not just when you're starting to feel overwhelmed. We want to start building these skills so they're available to us. We really need them. And actually, this is a skill we could all use every day. So there's two things that, actually, I've taught you all three things so far. If we were to go back, we did the soft landing at the beginning. We did the stress mindset, and then we did the mood meter. And so those three things are beautiful practices to help you just slow down and pause so that you could take more thoughtful, responsive action, not just for the holiday season, not just for the winter, but every moment. These are what I'm going to show you next are some other things that if we had more time, we can talk more about, but I'm just going to put them here because sometimes I think we don't think about some of these things as coping skills. this one, definitely probably many of us do, but movement, particularly in nature. And so your body is always in the present moment. And when I say our body, our physical body, our mental body is not always in the present moment. And our emotional body often goes where our mental body's going. But if you are moving your body and you're paying attention to your movement, and one of the best ways we can pay attention to our movement is to be out in nature, feeling the sun on our body, feeling the snow or the ground underneath our feet, feeling the cold on our face. Those are all ways that we can use our senses to be in the present moment. And then when we get back from that walk, snowshoeing or skiing or whatever it is, maybe just sitting outside on a bench, maybe when we get back inside, we can feel that openness, that expansiveness, clarity to make more skillful decisions. Speaking of seasonal affective disorder, one of the best things you all can do, if you don't have a light therapy lamp on your desk, which I do have one, or next to your couch, is get sunlight in your eyeballs every morning. Go out, get some fresh air, and get that sun into your eyes, in addition to taking vitamin D. So talk to your doctors about that. So movement, being in nature, there's so much wonderful research coming out about the healing impacts in nature, that even if we can't be out in nature, maybe nature's not accessible to us, even looking out a window, even pulling up a YouTube video, looking at nature on videos, listening to nature sounds. There's been research that shows even doing that is impactful in a positive way on our nervous system and helping us feel happy. So when we think about coping with stress, boundaries, and it's not just boundaries with other people, a lot of times it is, but it's also knowing your limits about time. Maybe how much time do I want to spend on social media? How much time do I want to spend on the couch? How much time do I want to spend outside? How much time do I want to spend on with this person? And so thinking about boundaries more globally. And the way I like to think about boundaries is think about what are the things you would like to be saying yes to? What would you like to be saying yes to that would really enhance your well-being and happiness? And know that it's okay for you to say yes to those things. And sometimes to say yes to things, we may have to say no to things. And in order to do all that, a really effective coping skill is being able to assertively communicate and express what you feel and what you need. That people, as much as we want people to just know how we feel and what we need, they don't. We need to advocate for ourselves. And this is really important, no matter what time of year, no matter what situation, is you first starting to connect with how you feel and then sharing that with someone else, but don't end there. What do you need? So just like we ask ourselves, we ask someone else, what do we need? We can share with someone else, what do I need? Beautiful coping skill. And then this one, embracing winter. I know we live in New England and New Englanders love to complain about the winter, but embrace it. Like, remember, we're like the bears too, hibernating. This is the time for us to go inward. It's a time for rest, reading, maybe doing a craft or arts or puzzles or cooking. And it's also a time for reflection. And so instead of maybe begrudging nature, or the winter or the cold, or there are ways that you can start to just enjoy it a little bit more. Maybe start putting on these warm lights. That's why I love this image. The lights are just so warm. And so what can we do to embrace winter? And it is a season that really will offer us some wonderful well-being impacts if we're a little bit more open to it. So as we close out our time together, I invite you all to put in the chat what you're taking with you. And if there's any questions that I can answer, I also now is the time for all of that. What are you taking with you, and are there any questions I can answer? I'm just going to open it up. Yeah, wonderful, Erin. Love it. That must feel really good for you. Yeah, so we have a question. Any advice on dealing with stress with family members and opposing views? To me, I go back to boundaries, and I think about this not so much like I need a I think about boundaries, about what I would like to put boundaries on for my own well-being when I'm around people. And so I think that that's a question to ask yourself, what is worth it and what's not worth it. And, I was just talking to some student yesterday, and there's always, and we all have it. There's always someone, whether it's a friend or a family member, who's going to have opposing views. And I think it's you deciding in that moment what would be helpful for you. Like, responding, or maybe taking some deep breaths, grounding, leaving the room. And I think it's really, Kim, connecting to your meaning, what would feel helpful to you in that moment. And I think, unfortunately, like, especially around the holidays, everything's so high stress anyways. Like, is now the time to be, kind of, and I'm very passionate about a lot of things, those of you who know me, but is it worth it? Yeah, is it worth it? Yeah, that's a good question. I wish we all had a better answer. If we all had a better answer for that, I don't think any of us would be on this webinar right now for the holidays. I liked not using good, bad, or fine to describe how you feel. I realize how often I default to that. I can see how it helps self-reflection. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And, speaking of the good, bad dichotomy, it applies to food too. There's no such thing as good or bad foods. Everything in moderation. Yes, we should do, a webinar on assertive communication would be amazing. So yes, the UNH Alumni Center's on, so they're making note of that. I think you're right. I think it's something we could all use in boundaries as well. Stop sharing the screen. So I invite you all, even if you didn't put it in the chat, I invite you to think about what you're taking with you, and whatever it is you're taking with you, I invite you to share it with someone. That's kind of your call to action, to use it to take care of yourself, but then share it with someone else. And when we share what we learn with someone else, it kind of embeds that a little bit more in our whole well-being. So to end our time together, I'm going to end like I usually do. I'm going to end with phrases of loving kindness to send to all of you. I'm going to repeat 3 phrases 3 times, and you could just let them soak into your being, listen to them, you engage with these 3 phrases however you like. So, may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy and may you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. These are intentions of loving kindness that I hold for myself, not just today, but every day. And I extend to each of you. Thank you all for sharing your time, sharing your voice, and sharing yourselves with yourself and each other. It's been an honor to hold space with you all. And I hope to see you all in another webinar. Thank you.